say the title and the premise. So last video, my first video even, I forgot to say the title of the series, which was, Did You Just Kidnap the Wrong Royal? So welcome to my thoughts on campfire cooking in another world with my absurd skill. I'll be calling it campfire cooking for short. Unless CCIAWWMAS is your well, it's not my preference, so too bad. Campfire cooking isn't a cooking isekai, as you can tell by the name. Most isekai like to explain how the character came to be here, whether or not they had something new. In this case, Mukura was accidentally brought along in a hero summoning, found the leadership of the country suspicious, and decided to leave the country after politely begging for some coins to get by. That's about it. I wouldn't be surprised if the fate of that kingdom, which is called Vajisego, is brought up again, because as Mukura finds out on his way out the country, Vajisego is already at war with demonkind because the king wants the land, and he's even trying to start a war with a nearby kingdom called Marvale too for similar reasons. That's a two-foot war, man. I know you got 3 OP heroes, but really? So the premise for the series is very simple. The protagonist begins exploring this new world he's been summoned to, and cooking along the way. All he wants is a peaceful life with a spice of adventure and exploration. However, one of the twists is that he's been forced into a contract with a legendary beast, a Fenrir, which is a giant wolf. All because he cooks some delicious ginger-fried pork. Isn't that the best? Thanks to that Fenrir, who is now called Fel, Mukura gets dragged into a lot of terrifying situations by chance, simply because Fel's mega super duper ridiculously strong. The wolf can kill almost anything easily, like a boss monster or a whole country, so he never fears for his life. Mukura, on the other hand, is often face to face with mobs of creatures or dangerous monsters. He might never receive physical damage because of Fel's protection, but he sure does receive psychological damage. It's a little sad. In the first book, there are scenarios such as being forced to train his fire magic as he's mauled by a village of goblins, or being forced to train his earth magic as he's mauled by a dozen floors worth of goblins, or having a hard time passing through villages and towns because Val looks very terrifying and people don't want his familiar and therefore him around. Dude spends a lot of time away from any human, but I don't think that's actually an issue for him considering the extra at the end of the book, which was a whole lot of cooking. It was so good. The reason why I read or watch or cooking anything is because it satisfies that mental desire for food, and this novel did awesome. Overall, the vibe of this novel is pretty relaxed, not cute or heart healing like Yudu Camp, but not serious or actiony like Shokugeki no Soma. Just a bit of exploring, a bit of comedy, a lot of cooking. Just average, like Mukoda's meant to be. That seems to be his characterization anyways. By the way, I first read this as a manga. When I saw there was a light novel of it, which is the original version, I figured, why not? For me, a fun read. Solid 7 out of 10. I prefer the manga, and I'll say why later, because in the end there were still some pretty interesting bits to this book. I think I'll start with the characters first. Introducing Makoda, the average main character, and Val, the giant pain that comes in wolf form. So, what I really want to talk about is their relationship and how much that affected my reading experience, plus my impression of their personalities, but to do that, I first have to give you a little rundown of who they are. First, Mukura, an average salary man who was unfortunate enough to be sucked into a hero summoning and then rudely tossed out of the castle. But he's lucky enough that his special ability, online supermarket, makes it easy to not only get food wherever he goes, but food and ingredients he's used to and loves to eat. Canned coffee, soy sauce, rice, and even sweets like dorayaki. What's more, depending on how much other world ingredients he uses in a meal, he's even able to grant others massive buffs. A little bit of obese support. I also love a man who can cook. Also, I didn't start reading the manga just for the cooking of the isekai. I also love to think of him as a tired man who just wants to take it easy and enjoy the sights of exploration. He seems to say as much as he spends most of the novel hashing out and finding a way to a peaceful country. In that sense, he's smart enough to find ways of staying out of trouble, such as trying to figure out the geopolitical situation at the surrounding countries. But he's also kinda dumb. Before he starts making bank off El's hunting skills, he first tries to sell salt, since he knows that's a high demand, low supply item, and air is far away from the sea. But he doesn't even try to figure out what the usual exchange rate is for salt, thinking it's the same as what he buys from his skill. Mukore, you stupid himbo. What kind of world do you think you're living in? If you know it's similar to Mando Europe, do you really think someone will go for $2 per gun? Anyways, the novel characterizes Mukore as an everyman kind of character. Second, Fel. A legendary monster that takes the form of a giant wolf. Officially, he's a Fenrir, which seems to be a super infamous monster in Norse mythology. Similarly, it seems Fel has had an infamous past where A, he has huge beef with an ancient dragon, which seems to be super powerful monsters in this world, and B, has straight up destroyed a nation. Definitely an OP character, especially when he has the blessing of the wind goddess, Ninru, which protects him from all negative status conditions and grants him great control over wind, plus holy magic. You know, I always thought it was unfair that most bosses in games were immune to status conditions. Unfair! Unfair! I agree with Mukore. Why is Fel so OP that potion his fish is just tingly? Are you eating wasabi? Man, regretfully moving past that. This past of his and the blessing means Fel has a wealth of experience, not just attacking, but defending as well. Apparently alive for 1,000 years, the wolf definitely deserves the arrogance that defines his personality so much. In summary, Fel is an arrogant but OP wolf, and Mukore is an average, tired guy. The MC and GP's relationship. In the first book, the main cast is made up of 3 characters, Mukore, Fel, and Sui. Sui doesn't appear until much later in the book. Basically, he's a baby slime that the two picked up along the way. He's the trash, since slimes can digest anything, and later, because apparently even other wolf trash grants a special effect, has pretty good attack potential. In other words, in terms of character interaction, this book is mostly made up of Mukore and Fel's squabbling. And one of the frequent topics of the squabbling is Fel's opinion that Mukore is a coward. I don't believe that for a second, because I know in Mukore's place, I'd probably be just as bewildered and frightened. After all, it's an entirely new world he's been dragged into, full of monsters he's never seen before and could easily die to. You know, earlier I said Mukore was forced to fight first a village's worth of goblins and later a dungeon floor's worth. That was Fel forcing Mukore into fight-flight in order to train his fire and earth magic because the wolf thought his progress was too slow. Oh yeah? Mind your business, Fel. The man literally didn't know he could use magic until like 2 or 3 weeks after he came into this world. The wolf barely gave him a decent rundown of how magic works, which seems to have something to do with monosicalism, question mark, because Fel learned it all by instinct. Additionally, Mukore only had 3 days to learn how to circulate mana through his body and a chance to light some flame upon his palm, before Fel forcefully took him to a goblin village out of impatience. It's a similar story with the dungeon goblins, though it was more like 3 weeks, but for learning earth magic. It was just really irritating how impatient Fel was, since for me, I'm someone who prefers to go by my pace, and Mukore clearly wants to take his learning at his own pace too. It was even more irritating during the dungeon scenario because Fel clearly saw something foreboding in Mukore's future, but didn't bother telling him what it was and continued to insult him throughout the dungeon. Also, Mukore wanted to learn magic because A, it's super cool, and B, Fel is really untrustworthy when the wolf will go wherever he wants, leaving Mukore defenseless. Fel's protection is a barrier you can't see. I can absolutely see Fel messing up in the future. The wolf does not inspire confidence in me. So I really want Mukore to learn some way of protecting himself and rubbing it in Fel's face. I guess you can tell I prefer Mukore over Fel. Arrogant and prideful characters aren't my favorite, even if they're a good guy. Though I don't really hate Fel either, his motivation for it and reaction to Mukore's cooking, plus the other snacks are really funny. The way he'll drool awaiting the preference he has for garlic steak sauce and then quickly leap into action to hunt down monster meat for meals is just as super cool and actiony as the wolf is. He's also a major source of gags and humor in the novel too. Plus, funny enough, Fel does give Mukore the sightseeing experience he wanted. After all, an adventurer party that can run through Griffin territory fearlessly and beat one up, take on a whole goblin village including its king, or discover and crush a newly formed dungeon is rare. Though I don't think Mukore cares so much about blood-pumping, thrilling achievements. Still, Fel does delivers a ton on the helpful and food side, such as fishing a ton of rare and delicious fish from a lake, finding a rare herb that allows Sui, the baby slime, to create super effective healing potions, and consistently hunting the delicacies that are A and S ranked monsters, enough to not only sell, but eat too. Side note, Makoto is at first astounded that people consider ogre a delicacy before Fel tells him there were so many monsters in the world that it's easier to hunt them. The wolf in turn is surprised that the dude's world raises animals. That little bit of world building and the author's commentary on their own country being particular about its food and therefore being the reason why it makes great food is pretty neat. I do feel like I hear people who've been to Japan say the food is great. Anyways, though Makoto really considers Fel a giant pain, the wolf is also the reason he can eat good food, travel safe and fast, plus learn a lot more about this world without revealing he's from a different world. The guy realized early on that if he let slip not only his otherworld status, but also his online supermarket skill, that he'd find no peace from people looking to exploit him. Again, that means Makoto really prefers to, and does spend little time with other humans. Which means, and he makes this tired observation later, that he's just an average dude squished between OP characters, namely Fel and Sui. That does make me wonder what other characters could join the main cast, or probably just a revolving door of side characters. So in summary, because of Makoto and Fel's relationship, my view of their personalities is a lot different than when I first read the manga. For one, Fel is a lot more irritating and impatient than I realized, and I'm also super sympathetic towards Makoto's plight. And while they don't have the best relationship, they're still able to talk amiably, make deals with each other, and bicker a ton. Antagonistic, but friendly enough without me thinking they should just separate. And curious enough, it's also their relationship that makes me prefer the manga over the novel. Not just because I get to see a wonderful art style, more of the world, and the food drawn out, but also because there's just less of Makoto's thoughts portrayed. Manga Makoto versus novel Makoto. So I know I said I prefer Makoto over Fel, and that is true, no matter the version, but Makoto is the kind of person to complain. A lot. And he complains way more in the novel than in the manga. There's just more space for it. But that's not the issue I have with this novel version. My issue is that he says the same complaint again and again, sometimes throughout the novel. That he will protest a lot, but also just tiredly go along with it. One example. Makoto complaining Fel is a genius. Whenever Fel questions Makoto's lack of progress in magic, the dude always retorts, either in his head or aloud, that Fel's a genius and blessed by the wind. Of course Fel doesn't get it. The actual complaint itself isn't that bad. It's just the old complaint he has whenever Fel asks go insults. He does learn later, thanks to an expensive library visit, that learning magic at all, which means being able to feel, circulate, and then use it, is pretty time consuming, especially if he wanted to learn all the elements. And there are a lot. There are so hacking many. I will list them for you. Fire, water, wind, earth, ice, lightning, healing, secrets, holy play, and darkness. Some of those sounded weird, right? I'm not going to explain them because they don't really matter in this first book or to me. The book does explain why they exist though, which is nice. Anyways, I figure Makoto could come up with more reasons to defend himself, like learning different elements is already hard for any human. Give me a break, let me figure it out. Or, you said you've been alive for like 1,000 years. I bet you don't even remember messing up matter when you first learned it. There, I literally wrote out 2 reasons in like a minute of thinking. Admittedly, that's more of a tiny detail. This complaint I had to see more complaints. It doesn't ruin the reading experience at all, especially since there's usually more cooking, more world building, and general bickering that soon follows after. It just pops up enough that I noticed it, wondered why I didn't have a similar complaint in the manga version, and well, the manga version doesn't have the room to see more of Makoto's thoughts. His complaints about Fel, as well as his thoughts on the world around him, are simplified, straightforward, which makes it easier, honestly, to get his impression of the situation. For instance, he plain says out that Fel is pretty self-important, prideful, which is not something he often does in the book. His novel version complains about Fel's actions more than Fel himself. Sometimes telling is better than showing. A similar thing also happens to the plot points, too. I'm pretty sure it's like a genuine feeling. Oh, right, yeah. There was one point reading the manga that Makoto and Fel ate spaghetti outside the town walls because Makoto was collecting some herbs for an adventure quest. I completely missed that in the novel. What I remember reading was Makoto setting his cooking up before getting whisked away to Fel's pile of meats. For some reason, Makoto laughing at Fel's tomato sauce covered face slipped my attention. I guess one could point out that a manga is visual, so it's harder to miss that, but even on rereading the novel, It's such a short scene, only a page on mobile, and Fell's sauce-covered face is like 3 sentences long. I reread it right in this part of the script, and it barely hits still. It's a shame. This is a slice of life comedy scene with cooking and humor I like so much, and I missed it. The manga is just a little better at telling you quickly what's happening, why it's important, who's in the scene, and just hitting the funny bone. I do really like the scenes where Fell is eating because I just didn't think about a wolf eating. Like how one would eat in that comedic flair the artist gives Fell. Neat. I got really sidetracked talking about Makoto and Fell a lot, but I also want to mention some cute characters. Sui, the adorable slime, and Ninwoo, the comical goddess of the wind. The best. They're the best! Absolutely my favorite characters in both the manga and the novel. Up to now, I've only briefly mentioned them, so this is my appreciation corner for Sui and Ninwoo. First, Sui. Like I said before, he's a baby slime Makoto and Fell picked up. He eats all the food packaging from Makoto's purchases, and that one point was awesome to me when I realized it. Of course there's trash! It's fun enough to just store it all since Makoto has an infinite item box thanks to him being an Otherworlder, but it's so much more cool the author found a way to get rid of it, plus give Sui even more roles. Like being adorable. Just like Val, Sui is an enthusiast of Makoto's cooking and soon learns how to beg for seconds. When the slime also learns how to speak, he refers to Val as Uncle Val, which just... Wow, Mr. Val, you've got a little kid who looks up to you. Then there's an especially funny side to Sui, only hinted at for now, but I have my suspicions. Which is that maybe Sui is a battle maniac. Okay, so during the dungeon scenario where Makoto's hastily firing off earth magic, Sui is also firing off his own attacks, a skill called Acid Bullet. It does crazy damage thanks to Otherworld Trash granting him levels for some reason. But there's an almost, and Makoto comments on it, enthusiastic feel to Sui's battling? Like, I'm pretty sure Sui is higher level than Makoto by the end of the book, but absolutely by the end of the dungeon, Sui has been alive for only 2 weeks and he's level 7 versus Makoto's 3. Dude. Then later in the storyline, and I also mentioned this before, Sui eats a rare herb, commonly used for ethers, which are a legendary healing item, and is able to produce highly effective healing potions himself. The actual effects are unknown, but that's super duper cool. So, in all, Sui is an adorable slime that can attack and heal, and he absolutely deserves all of your love and good food. Then there's the goddess of the wind, Ninwoo. Most of the actual chapters are dedicated to her perspective, which gives an interesting look at the world of gods and their politics. Not quite sure what the whole thing is, but it seems the deities that oversee the world Makoto was joined are different from whatever deities are overseeing Earth, and there's this mutual agreement not to mess with each other's worlds. This means if there is a particular thing a deity likes or dislikes in a different world, they can do nothing about it. So, Makoto being able to purchase and therefore bring items from a different world is a very interesting case because all the gods want a big piece of otherworld food, and they do not want to share. Ninwoo herself loves sweets and is devastatingly frustrated that this world isn't advanced far enough to make sweets that aren't just fruits, honey, and jam. Nah, she wants dorayaki, cream buns, chocolate, and sweet canned coffee. Her reaction to eating these sweets is just the best too. She stuffs her face, yells about how great the texture and flavor is, and then accidentally devours it all in an instant. It's both sweet and comical. This does mean later, since I don't believe Minnie will be able to keep the secret to herself, that Makoto may be paid some visits in the future. Of course, Ninwoo also grants him her blessing in return for weekly sweets, so if the status condition isn't too bad, like a curse, Makoto won't be affected at all. So in all, Ninwoo is a great source of comedy and cuteness, with some interesting implications for the future. Iron Will, an adventurer party. So I'm mentioning this party not because they're especially important, but because how the novel treats them is how it treats all the side characters, and I think that's really interesting. First, these guys don't matter at all. Like, yeah, they're given names and an actual description, plus the promise of future appearances, but in the grand scheme of things, our main cast of Makoto, Fell, Sui, and Ninwoo, who I'm going to add as I'm realizing she's probably going to appear a lot and be really important, all speak in their own formatted way. Well, except for Mukoto, but he's our POV character, he's just special that way. But anyways, Fel is given bowls, Sue is given brackets, and Ninru is given those, you know this face? It's, that pointy bit. Anyways, it's just super obvious to know which of the main cast is talking when, but as I was reading over Iron Will's dialogue, there weren't a lot of dialogue tags. Like, yeah, I could separate out most of the words based on personality, but when I couldn't give less of a care stick who was actually talking beyond the meaning of the dialogue, and usually that was just praise over Mikoto's cooking or exposition about the world. The same holds true for all of the side characters, like the butcher at the Adventurers Guild, who went on for pages about the materials and their uses from Pel's pile of corpses, and the caravan of merchants at the end of the novel, who were saved by Fel, and we know that they're going to be part of the story for at least a little longer because Mikoto's going to travel with them. I don't give a donkey saddle about any of them. Instead, I'm in it for the interactions between the main casts, look-sees into the world that they're in, and how it's different from any other isekai worlds, and of course, the cooking sequences. It's just kind of unique how much the author also doesn't seem to care either, only enough to give side characters a certain role and personality to separate them from everyone else. Maybe make them part of a gag too. Like with the receptionist that Mikoto first meets at the Merchants Guild versus the adventurers. The merchant receptionist is all smiles and manners, happy to answer Mikoto's questions, while the adventure receptionist is cold and rude, annoyed when Mikoto asks what the rules are. It basically just gives Mikoto reason to complain about the difference, and after that, neither of them appear again. They don't have to. While I do wonder if they will truly be a side character that totally matters, like it's really common for a hero in an isekai to have a hometown of sorts, or to really care about certain characters in a certain place, there doesn't seem to be a lot of reason for Mikoto to settle down like that. For one, he's decided to travel the worlds. 2, he's an outsider with special skills that anyone would be happy to exploit. 3, Fel makes people really nervous. And 4, based on the action, he doesn't seem all that lonely. Mikoto's a loner, and I respect that. Now moving on, cooking is the best part. Okay, so I did the math, and excluding chapter 4, there is an average of 3 cooking sequences / food related scenes per chapter. This does include the extras. Chapter 4 is kind of short. It's just learning about magic and finally getting hold of a map, plus deciding where Mikoto is finally gonna go. There's still food in the chapter, but it's just him buying tonkatsu and yakitori from a shop and grilling up steaks in different sauces real quickly. The author already did a whole scene for steaks in chapter 2, so of course they wouldn't dedicate another big scene to it. Still a little disappointing, but entirely understandable. Now, I want to talk a little about why I like Campfire cooking enough to not only purchase and read the manga, but also purchase and read the light novel. It's because I have this hunger for food that isn't a physical, man, I just want to eat. First, my stomach and tongue can't handle a lot. Second, I just really like learning about different foods and ingredients, how they're cooked and why they're cooked that way, plus the gooey details of how it all tastes and looks. I love food content on YouTube, and some of the artists I follow on Twitter, well, I follow them because I love it when they draw food. So I read a ton of cooking manga, but I don't read too many novels related to cooking, so curiosity killed the cat. What would it be like to read a cooking scene versus seeing it? The satisfaction absolutely brought me back because the descriptions of this novel, along with the character reactions, are just so good. Chapter 2 especially, I mentioned that it has steak scene, and what makes that steak scene so great is that Mikoto has all of these steak sauces: onion, butter, garlic, soy sauce, grated radish, teriyaki, and yakiniku. Not only is it easy to imagine, but it's also surprising to me. I don't normally put sauce on a steak. Salt and pepper? Yeah, but butter or garlic? Well, so the scene is not only easy to imagine, but surprising too. Val absolutely slips up each of the steaks in turn and reveals he has a preference for the garlic flavor. Mikoto prefers the onion sauce and carefully places his own portion atop a bowl of rice, which I totally do too. And that's what the novel sold as cooking to me. This is a novel where the protagonist is an everyman, and almost every person can attest to this one fact. What kind of lazy you want things to be easy, especially if it's really easy to make delicious food? And those are the kinds of recipes that Mikoto does. From flipping steaks to baking fish in foil or doing a quick bread and fry for karaage, and then pickling some cucumbers for a quick snack. It's all stuff that anyone could easily do at home, with different ingredients if they wanted. Yeah, I do appreciate cooking fiction, where the protagonist cares so much about getting the greatest taste and therefore using more time-consuming and difficult methods like grating fresh ginger, but I also really like how Makoto knows he can do this easily, but just uses store-bought ginger paste because it's easier, and he doesn't care because he knows it'll still taste good. Same, buddy. Same. I'm kind of sad that I don't have more to say on this section, but if anyone reads this novel because of this video, I just don't want to spoil it. And actually, I would say read the manga instead. It's just manga versus light novel. It's basically just the best version of the series being comedic adventure isekai with a twist of campfire cooking. For one, you get to see way more of the side characters goofing around, full of backgrounds of daily life that make the world feel more real and present, Makoto and Fella bickering with facial expressions, and of course, the actual food along with character reactions. To me, the art style is the biggest sell. Think about it, just... But I also like how the artist did a lot of funny gags that you couldn't do in a novel, like the expressions a party Iron Will puts on Fell appeals, just absolutely frightened out of their lives. Same thing with Fell, taking Makoto on a wild dash from the grassy plains outside the town walls to inside the walls. I absolutely forgot that the wolf actually straight up ran past the guards and nobody could do anything about it. It was great. Admittedly, I might also be biased because the manga was my first introduction to the series, and that got me thinking about other series where the manga or the anime was my first introduction, but I prefer different adaptations. Of course, the two series I'll be talking about are isekai. I almost read only isekai for months, sometimes. The first series is Kuma desu ka nanika? Or So I'm a Spider, So What? And from what I read, it only followed Kumoko's POV as she wakes up in a huge dungeon, surprised to see a spider, but determined to survive no matter the cost or the sin. Meanwhile, the light novels actually feature a ton of different characters' perspectives because there were so many different factions in the series, and it just makes sense because the plot explores a whole world being plunged into war, the reasons for it and the consequences, alongside the actual reason the world exists at all. Like, Kumoko remains the most important protagonist, and probably the one every reader cares the most about, but the other perspectives gain importance because of how much they're affected by her actions, and how their actions in turn could impact her or characters significant to her in the future. So I can't just accept the manga version, which just explores her view for so long. And I also don't really care to see a simplified version of the side characters either, unlike Campfire cooking, because the details really matter. I guess it's because the plot of So I'm a Spider is way more serious than that of Campfire cooking. The second series is Yojo Senki, or The Saga of Tanya the Evil. I saw the anime first, and I absolutely dug it. I believe at this point I've watched the first season, well, at the time of me recording this, there's only one season, but maybe a year or two ago, it was confirmed to be a second season. There was also a movie. I've watched the first season's completion almost 3 times, which is more than I can say of most anime I've watched, and the exceptions are notable because they tend to be classics or emotionally important to me, like March Comes In Like a Lion or Ancient Magus Bride. Tanya is just fun, and this fun continued when I read the first book of the light novel version. To me, each of the adaptations have their benefits despite following the same plotline, pretty close, just like Campfire cooking. The cool action scenes and the awesome voice acting of the anime, and the dominating world building, history lessons, and war tactics of the light novel. Each of those things are very precious, and it doesn't feel tedious at all reading or watching them over again. It makes me appreciate all versions, like my feelings for Campfire cooking or So I'm a Spider. Like, Tanya actually has a spin-off that's just about food, and it's really funny. It's wonderful. It's about good food and bad food because, after all, it's wartime. So the verdict I've decided is that, to me, the manga will always be the best version of Campfire cooking, despite first gaining popularity as a light novel, and it is the one I highly recommend to anyone who wants to start this series. That's my video on Campfire cooking in another world, my episode skill. when I was first planning the structure of the script, I realized, yeah, this is gonna be a long one. Because unlike Run Royal, I super duper like this series and I just want to talk about it a lot. God, this is gonna be interesting to draw out and edit. This was a pretty long video, but I had a pretty good time. Thanks for watching. Bye.